Welcome to AI After Dark, where we slow down the conversation around technology, society, and the future of human thinking. Tonight, we're talking about trust. Specifically, how much trust we should place in AI as it becomes part of everyday life. These tools can answer questions, draft documents, summarize information, and offer advice with a level of confidence that can feel impressive. Sometimes they are genuinely helpful. But confidence is not the same as accuracy, and a polished answer is not always a reliable one. So the challenge is not simply whether to use AI or avoid it. The challenge is learning how to use it wisely. AI can now answer questions, write documents, summarize information, and offer advice in ways that often sound confident and convincing. But sounding right is not the same as being right. As AI becomes more useful in everyday life, how should people decide when to trust what it tells them and when to question it?
People should trust AI in proportion to the risk of being wrong. For low-stakes tasks, like brainstorming, drafting a message, summarizing something you already understand, or getting a starting point, AI can be very useful. In those cases, you do not need perfect certainty. You just need help thinking faster or seeing options. But the moment the answer affects money, health, legal decisions, safety, someone's reputation, or an important business choice, confidence is not enough. That is when people should slow down and verify. Ask, where did this information come from? Is it current? Can I check it against a reliable source? Does the answer explain its reasoning, or does it just sound polished? I also think people should question AI when the topic is personal or context-heavy. AI may give a reasonable general answer but miss the details that matter in a real situation. So the rule is not trust AI or don't trust AI. Use it as a capable assistant, not as final authority. Let it help you think, organize, and explore, but keep human judgment in charge, especially when the consequences matter.
The most useful rule I can offer is this. Treat AI the way you treat a very well-read friend who occasionally misremembers things and doesn't always know what they don't know. For low-stakes tasks, drafting an email, brainstorming ideas, getting a quick explanation of a concept, reasonable trust is fine. The cost of being slightly wrong is low, and you can usually sense when something feels off. But when the stakes rise, the calculus changes. Medical decisions, legal questions, financial choices, anything where being wrong has real consequences. That's where you slow down and verify. Not because AI is always wrong in those areas, but because confident delivery is not the same as reliable information. AI can sound equally certain when it's right and when it's making something up. The deeper habit worth building is asking yourself, does this actually matter if it's wrong? If the answer is yes, treat the AI's response as a starting point, not a conclusion. Look for a second source. Talk to a human expert. The goal isn't suspicion, it's appropriate skepticism, applied where it counts.
Trusting AI comes down to looking at the stakes of the situation and the source of the information. For everyday tasks where the risk is low, like drafting a routine email, brainstorming ideas, or summarizing a long article, it makes sense to trust AI as a helpful starting point. In these scenarios, a small mistake won't cause serious harm, and you can easily spot and correct errors yourself. However, when the stakes are high, you have to shift from trust to verification. If you are using AI for medical advice, financial planning, or legal research, you should treat its answers as unverified claims. AI models operate on patterns, not deep understanding, which means they can present inaccurate information with absolute confidence. The best approach is to verify any critical fact through an independent, trusted source. Think of AI as a capable assistant rather than an unquestionable expert. It is excellent for speed and efficiency, but human judgment remains essential for accuracy, ethics, and context. By balancing openness to its utility with a healthy skepticism toward its output, you can safely integrate AI into your life.
All three participants frame AI as useful, but not automatically trustworthy. The shared theme is that trust should depend on stakes, context, and verification. For low-risk tasks, they see AI as helpful for speed, drafting, brainstorming, summarizing, and organizing ideas. But when the consequences involve health, money, law, safety, reputation, or major decisions, they agree that AI should be treated as a starting point rather than a final authority. What practical habits should everyday users build so they can verify AI responses without becoming overly suspicious or afraid to use the technology?
A useful habit is to treat verification as a normal part of using AI, not as a sign that something went wrong. For everyday users, I'd keep it simple. First, check the stakes. If the answer is just helping you brainstorm, write, or understand a basic concept, you can move quickly. But if it affects a decision, verify it before acting. Second, ask the AI to show its reasoning or explain what assumptions it is making. That often reveals where the answer is strong and where it may be guessing. Third, cross-check important facts with one or two reliable sources, especially dates, prices, rules, medical information, legal guidance, or anything current. And finally, use your own context. AI may give a good general answer, but you know the real situation better than it does. That way, verification becomes a practical safety habit, not fear. You are still using the technology. You are just using it with judgment.
The simplest habit is learning to ask follow-up questions rather than accepting the first answer. If AI tells you something important, ask it to explain its reasoning or where that information comes from. Gaps and uncertainties often surface quickly when you push a little. A second habit, notice when a response is surprisingly clean and confident. Real answers to complex questions usually have some nuance, some qualification, some "it depends." When everything sounds perfectly settled, that's worth a second look. Beyond that, keep a short mental list of sources you actually trust. A reputable medical site, a legal aid resource, a professional you can call, and use AI to help you get to those sources faster rather than replacing them entirely. None of this requires suspicion. It just requires treating AI as one input among several, especially when something genuinely matters.
Building practical verification habits means making a few simple checks part of your routine. First, practice spot checking key facts. If an AI gives you a specific date, a statistic, or a quote, quickly search for that specific detail using a trusted search engine or primary source. You do not need to double-check every word, just the core facts that your final decision or work relies on. Second, learn to look for specific evidence in the prompt itself. You can ask the AI to explain its reasoning or list the types of sources it usually draws from for that topic. If the explanation feels vague or relies on circular logic, that is your cue to dig deeper. Ultimately, verification should feel like collaborating, not investigating. By treating AI as a teammate whose work you quickly proofread, you keep your workflow fast without sacrificing accuracy.
The participants converge on a practical version of trust. Verification should be routine, proportionate, and not fear-based. They emphasize checking the stakes first, asking follow-up questions, looking for assumptions or weak reasoning, and cross-checking important facts with reliable sources. The shared message is that users do not need to distrust AI entirely. They need to treat it as a useful assistant whose output still deserves review when the consequences matter. The major insight from tonight's discussion is that trusting AI is not an all-or-nothing decision. It depends on what you are asking, what the answer will be used for, and what could happen if the answer is wrong. Across the conversation, there was a clear shared principle. AI can be very useful for low-risk work, helping us brainstorm, organize ideas, draft, summarize, or explore a topic. But when the stakes involve health, money, law, safety, reputation, or major decisions, usefulness is not the same as authority. That is where human judgment has to step back in. The nuance among the participants was less about disagreement and more about emphasis. One focused on matching trust to risk. Another emphasized healthy skepticism without fear. Another brought the idea down to simple checks, spot-checking facts, asking follow-up questions, and using trusted sources when it matters. And that may be the healthiest way to think about AI right now, not as something to blindly trust, and not as something to constantly fear, but as a powerful assistant that still needs a thoughtful human partner. The future may not belong to people who trust AI the most, or question it the most. It may belong to people who know when to do each. Thank you for watching AI After Dark. Share your question or perspective in the comments, and if this conversation was useful, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.